Hello and welcome to High Leverage Practices for Our Kids, Connected Practices for Streamlined Success, presented by Ashley MacGavin and Shannon Goodbeau. I'm Kristen Brooks, Executive Director for SIP, and I am thrilled to be your moderator for this session. Celise Heron, Program Support Specialist for SIP, is also here for any supports you may need throughout this session. So first, a few logistics. I'm sure you're familiar with this in other breakout sessions, but just a quick review. That this session will be recorded and archived on the conference agenda page after the conference for 1 month. Closed captioning is available by clicking on the CC button on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. The interpretation icon is in the same area that will provide access for Spanish translation. We'll ensure that our ASL interpreters are spotlighted along with the PowerPoint and presenter. Please make sure that your volume is muted to avoid any background distractions while presenters are speaking. We encourage you to engage with others in the chat so that you can learn alongside one another. So first, a little bit about Ashley and Shannon. Shannon is passionate about increasing inclusive practices and working with educators to improve outcomes for all students. She's worked as a general education teacher, special education teacher, and program specialist. She hopes to continue to provide educators with the tools necessary to successfully include all students through the use of high leverage practices, data use and governance, and continuous improvement methodologies. Ashley has worked in the field of special education for over 10 years. She holds a master's degree in education and credentialing, including an administrative services credential, education specialist credential in mild moderate and moderate severe disabilities, and multiple subject teaching credential with an authorization in mathematics. Increasing graduation rates and improving post-secondary outcomes for students with disabilities is Ashley's passion. So with that, thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Ashley to get the show going.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start my screen share and kick us off this morning. So first off, I just want to welcome everyone to our session, and thank you, Kristen, for that wonderful introduction. You are joining us for High Leverage Practices for Our Kids, Connected Practices for Streamlined Success, and let's jump on into it. So Shannon and I are part of the System Improvement Leads project, and we're a grant-funded project that works in partnership with the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence and the California Department of Education. Our project consists of 3 SELPAs. Shannon and I are with Riverside County SELPA. We also work alongside West San Gabriel Valley SELPA and El Dorado SELPA as well. So just our mission statement here, I won't read it to you, but the goal of the System Improvement Leads is really to build capacity of SELPAs and LEAs throughout the state. And that capacity building is around data use and governance, continuous improvement methodologies, and high leverage practices. Our ultimate goal really is to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. Our team, as you can see, like I mentioned, our project does consist of 3 SELPAs. We have a large team and we serve the entire state of California. So your presenters, Kristen did a great job of introducing Shannon and I, but I'll share a little more about us. We've been working on personalizing ourselves as presenters also, because we do attend a lot of professional development and conferences. And I know I'm not the only one thinking this. When you wonder, like, okay, this person's presenting, but who really are they? Like, what is their background? Like, what's their credibility there? So we're like, we've been trying something new of wanting to personalize, starting off with personalizing us, so you get to learn a little more about us. So you heard kind of the professional background that Kristen shared, but I'm married, I don't have any kids. As you can see, it's a picture of my husband and I with Mickey. I'm a big Disney fan. I'm a Magic Key Pass holder. I go to Disneyland at least once a month. And I have a photo here with my colleagues. I recently discovered Hawaii is my favorite place. I went there for the first time in March. So I will definitely be returning there at least once a year. And like Kristen mentioned too, my passion really is around improving graduation and graduation rates and post-secondary outcomes with students, for students with disabilities. Experience-wise, I've really worked with every grade level, K-12, adult ed, alternative ed, continuation high school. So I have a lot of experience in all different areas of education. I'll let Shannon share a little more about herself.
And thank you everybody for joining us and having me present and engage with all of you. Thank you, Ashley. As you can see here too, some of the things that I really enjoy. I've got a picture of my husband and myself and my son there traveling, one of our favorite things too. So we've got a fun trip coming up in a few weeks. Besides my son, we have 2 dogs that hopefully will not interfere with my presentation today because they tend to be noisy when I go live or I'm presenting. So hopefully that will not happen for today. And the other picture is just all of the wonderful colleagues that I've had an opportunity to not only work alongside, but to also learn from over the past 4 years while we have been working very passionately to provide resources and supports for educators across the state. And I am so excited to be here with this whole inclusion movement and then having an opportunity to work alongside the folks in SIP too. So I look forward to engaging with you all over the next hour.
And Shannon, I think you underplayed your upcoming trip a little bit. I'll share with everyone. Shannon is going to Italy next month. So that is a fun and very exciting trip. Okay, so today's agenda, as you can see, we have a QR code there. That's the link to our presentation materials. We have a folder containing the slide deck, as well as we have a document that contains the link to all of the materials that we share, all of the resources that we share today. So it's a one-stop shop. And then also there is a Padlet that we're going to use for an activity in the beginning, and that will be linked there as well. So virtual gallery walk, we're going to jump into that momentarily. That will be our first activity. We're going to talk about connected practices, which really is diving into the background and the main components of the resource that we'll be sharing. And then we're going to be closing out with a call to action. So learning objectives, this is really what we hope that you gain from our session. And no matter what your position is in education, we hope that you really learn how to integrate these aligned practices that we're going to share into your systems to support students' social emotional learning. We're going to be talking about high leverage practices, universal design for learning, the CSTPs, the CASTLE framework, and how that all fits together to support social emotional learning and improve outcomes for all students. We're also going to be showing you some sample activities that you can utilize with students, share with colleagues, etc., to support SEL. And we hope that you leave this presentation wanting to learn more, wanting to dig into that resource, wanting to dig into some of these other strategies we share as well. With that being said, we're going to jump right into an activity. And Shannon's going to drop the link in the chat to a Padlet. We're going to do a virtual gallery walk. Shannon and I like to do gallery walks when we present in person as well. Because we are virtual time, we pivoted, and all the activities that we do with you all, we're modeling as well for activities that you might do with your students, even as adult learners as well, like we're doing right now. So once you're in the Padlet, you're going to see there's multiple sections here, and these sections are pictures. So I'm going to click on one, and with the picture is a quote. So we'd like you to take a look at each of these quotes. For example, every student has special talents. It is our duty and privilege to find these talents and to adapt our lessons to best implement them. And you're going to share your thoughts. So what resonates with you? So again, we're imagining, well, we are all in the same space. We're in a virtual space, but if we were together, we'd be walking around the room, looking at these various posters, reading these quotes, and share what resonates with us. You're going to add to the Padlet, and then, after a little bit, you can share out as well. We'll come together as a group. So I'm going to let you all explore. Oh, I'm seeing some really great ones here. I'm just going to share out some of these with the group. Yes, when we foster strengths, we develop other skills. It is up to us as educators to support each individual's strengths and allow everyone to shine. Yes. This is a great one too. Show me your budget and I will show you what you value. So powerful. Okay. I definitely would encourage you all to continue to add, even as we progress further in our presentation. If anything strikes you or resonates, feel free to add on here. I'm loving all the comments that are coming in. Shannon and I definitely love starting with an activity just to get us grounded in our why, and why is this work of inclusion important. So thank you all for joining us in that activity. So I'm going to go ahead and transition back to our slide deck. And we're just going to reflect on this quote as well to just continue in our grounding and prepare us for the information that's going to be shared. Educational equity means that each child receives what they need to develop to their full academic and social potential. It's a quote from the National Equity Project. So again, we're focusing on the needs of each child to develop that full academic and social potential, and inclusive strategies are certainly one way to do that. Okay, so the reason you're all joining us, supporting SEL through connected practices. Before we dive into the resource, Shannon and I like to spend some time really laying the foundation for the why behind the resource, what it is, what are the components, and an important part of that is the evolution of the work, because this resource has been an evolution. So I'm going to back up back to a year ago, right, Shannon? I'm like, it's been a year. We were talking about it and we're like, oh my goodness, the year's gone by so fast. So yes, last May, our SELPA, Riverside County SELPA, puts on an annual mental health symposium. And Shannon and I had been kicking around this idea pre-COVID, because we had had our first mental health conference back in 2019. So then our 2020 mental health conference was postponed, 2021. So we've been really like, talking through this idea around there's all these really good resources out there. Part of our job is, again, capacity builders. So we gather resources, we share that with the folks that we support. And we know, CASEL, UDL, high leverage practices. There's a ton of information out there, but how could we streamline it into like this integrated framework to support social emotional learning for students? So we did a proposal again back in for the 2020 conference that didn't happen. We continued to think about this. Finally, we got to present May 2022 on this topic. Our keynote for that conference happened to be Katie Novak, which was very exciting. And one of our colleagues grabbed Katie when we were presenting and said, hey, like, we have a presentation that has a UDL focus. So he brought Katie into the room and we were presenting and I was talking, and then I got a little stumbled. I was like, Katie Novak's in the room and I'm presenting on UDL. I hope we're doing it justice. So nonetheless, it was super cool and Katie was taking notes, and then Katie came up to us at lunch and we were nerding out because she was really interested in the resource, had some suggestions, and wanted to partner up. Just super cool. And as you can see, there's our picture of Katie Novak with our team. So we did partner up on this resource. Katie suggested we incorporate some, strategies that could be implemented. Also bringing in the California standards for the teaching profession, making that connection. So it went from this, standard Google document to this nice, beautiful resource that you see here that we'll be diving into. There's also a blog posting as well. I'm going to do a live navigation a little bit later, and we'll share the links to all that. It's linked in your document that has all the links in the presentations as well. So feel free to explore all of that. But before we really dive into it, Shannon's going to be laying some foundation. But like I mentioned earlier, this resource is really centered around the connected practices of high leverage practices, the California standards for the teaching profession, universal design for learning, and the CASEL framework. because again, lots of good stuff out there, but we wanted to connect it, make it tangible for those who are serving students to go then implement, not spend all the time sifting through a lot of different resources. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon, who then is going to get into each of those connected practices.
Well, thank you, Ashley. So I am going to dive right in, and I'm going to just give a brief overview of all of the four sections that we talked about that all kind of come together in an alignment for the resource that we have developed that we hope will make planning a little easier, or also kind of calm the nerves or the anxiety that some teachers have right now with so many competing factors that they have on our plate. So we are trying to have educators approach integrating all of these different or great resources or things that they might be voluntold or strongly encouraged to utilize, or are utilizing because they feel very passionate about it. So we are going to start with the high leverage practices, which is one of the core foundations for our system improvement leads grant work that we are doing. And the HLPs are critical research-based strategies that focus on improving outcomes for all students. There's 22 of them, and they're organized around 4 intertwined domains, which are collaboration, assessment, social, emotional, behavioral, and instruction. And these high leverage practices were created in 2014 with a project that was initially started by the Council for Exceptional Children. And they took about 2 years of really doing panel discussions, collaborative opportunities nationwide. And they took about 2 years to develop these 22 practices that pretty much lay the groundwork for the skill development that teachers or educators need to have in order to provide quality instruction for all students. And so I'm going to kind of dive in a little bit more detail on what those practices are. So as Ashley has said earlier, our grant work, we've been working together now for about approximately 4 years. And one of our primary areas is the high leverage practices. So we have gone to trainings, webinars, taken deep dives into the web. We have read numerous books, numerous blogs. And what we have done is we have synthesized what we think are those big key pieces of what the high leverage practices are. And they very much align to a lot of the work as well that SIP is doing. So if you read some of the key messages or the ideas that SIP would like you to walk away with, I think they very much align to kind of what the core is of what high leverage practices are. And really the goal is to have a shared language and expectations between general education and special educators. They really want to promote assessment literacy to make sure that what we are working on engaging with students is actually working and leading to improved outcomes. The foundation really too is to teach educators, or to have educators improve their practice, so what they are doing can help students strive for independence. And then I think at the most basic core really is to develop those skill sets to allow teachers to have students advocate for collective responsibility and inclusion. So really at the end of the day, we are promoting, or high leverage practices are promoting, that what we do should be impacting and be accessible for all students, not your students, those students, our students. And so in the essence of time, I'm not going to go into great detail because I could probably spend a whole day just talking about the different domains. But in your participants folder and in the slide deck you have available, we do go into a little bit more detail about each of the high leverage practices. So we've taken the 4 domains, we've kind of come up with a summary quote that we feel encapsulates all of the key content. And one of them being collaboration. You can kind of see here that it just emphasizes and focuses on all of the people and professionals and family members that educators have to collaborate with on a daily basis. And to the side or the right there, we highlight some of the key specific HLPs. So how do you collaborate with colleagues, leading effective meetings, and collaborating with families? And we know that's not the entirety of all of the collaboration that educators do, but we're wanting to synthesize some of the work for you. The next HLP is assessment. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail, but it kind of shows you some of those key specific areas. Educators, regardless if you're a paraprofessional, if you're a counselor, a school psychologist, an instructional coach, what are some of those things that you need to utilize when talking about assessment to be able to individualize and make academic opportunities accessible for all students? The next one is key, that social emotional behavioral component. And I don't think it could be any more pressing than this post-COVID era as we're having since been returned back to classes, dealing with new social behaviors, emotional behaviors, getting back into just the routines. So the social emotional behavioral component of high leverage practices just kind of bring us back to what are those really key, most important things that we need to have environmentally to make sure that students can be successful. You know, the environment, how are we using feedback, teaching of social skills, just to make sure that all of these things are present in every classroom, every aspect or environmental location on the campus to make sure students have an opportunity to be seen, heard, and engage with everyone else. And then the final one is instruction, which is by nature of education, the largest of the domains. There are 12 specific HLPs help educators hone in on their practices and their skill. We picked 3 of the top we feel are the most, I don't know if anyone is much more important than the other, but ones that we might want to start on if we're really kind of jumping into the HLP's work. How do you adapt curriculum and tasks materials? How do you promote student engagement? And how do you take these things that we're teaching in a small group environment, one-on-one environment, or in your classroom, and how can you generalize those to new learning so they're successful, or students can be successful with the skills that you're teaching in every type of environment. And so this slide here, we recognize that the HLPs, when we post them and we have them on the side there, are very broad. And we want to show you very quickly here how you can take one of these broad concepts. We chose HLP 20 with providing intensive instruction, and how you can take a vague strategic or concept, and how can you scale it down or funnel it down to a specific tangible or actionable item. So we chose intensive instruction, and we were looking at it as a way to support inclusion. So you could take that providing intensive instruction and think about, as an educator, what are some opportunities or mediums if you're working with your students to make sure that they have an opportunity to engage, potentially present, or work with other students in a collaborative group. So you would use the data collection that you might have to identify which one of your students prefer using virtual slides. And if you have a group that like to present or share using tech, you would then work with that student or with multiple strategies to help them engage in group work or presentation by using direct instruction, modeling, prompt hierarchies, and then potential assistive technology. And from that, you'd scale down to what is something that you can do in your classroom to collect data on and monitor and make sure it's having a positive impact. You could create a short video demonstrating how to share and advance slides during a presentation or group activity. So if you have a kiddo that's being mainstreamed or included in a general education environment, you would work on very specific academic skills to help them be and have a voice in that general education learning or collaborative opportunity with their peers. So taking that very broad, scaling it down to a tangible, actionable item. If you, I hope, once you leave this session today, want more information about high leverage practices, you can go to our systemimprovement.org website, where we have a plethora of resources, including video modules, one-step pages that kind of encompass what the high leverage practices are. So if you want to share them with your colleagues. And then we also have a resource where we've taken all of the state SPPI indicators. And then if you are working on a potential SIM plan or ways to improve outcomes at a site-based or district level, we have aligned the high leverage practices to all those key indicators. So if you're looking at how can you improve your least restrictive environment, if you're looking at timely eligibility, if you are looking at potential challenges with disproportionality, we have aligned HLPs to some big other kind of overarching ways that you can look at improving those practices within your organization. So there are multiple resources on our website to help support your learning and further inquiry into the high leverage practices. Now this one I absolutely love, but unfortunately Ashley and I did not create it, but we feel very strongly that this is a great resource for leaders within an organization. So if your district or site has initiatives happening that you think will align to one of the HLPs that we shared, or maybe multiple HLPs, this is a resource that's aimed at leaders to really support maybe PD, coaching, mentoring opportunities. and is really a practical tool for engaging staff members and learning how high leverage practices and SPED can enhance student learning. So again, if you're looking for something, if you're a coach or a district leader, this is a wonderful resource to help your staff become more familiar with the high leverage practices. And then also too, we talked earlier on about collaboration and communicating. One of our most beneficial, strongest resources are our paraeducators, and high leverage practices have a whole module series, year-long series where that's asynchronous, that you can have your paraeducators sign up for an account. It's free, and it will also help them become more familiar with those key learnings of high leverage practices. So everybody's kind of speaking the same language. It also builds up the paraeducator skill set as well for working with all students in a variety of in learning environments, both pushing into the general education classroom. If you are working on collecting data, just a plethora of resources too, to build up the skill set and the capacity for your paraeducation staff. And also, we know that our primary focus for today's session is really how, with intentional planning and alignment, high leverage practices are supportive of making rigorous and engaging learning experiences accessible for all students. But with that being said, there really are additional resources to ensure educators working with students needing more extensive supports can capitalize on students' diverse background knowledge too. So in addition, this book, High Leverage Practices for Students with Extensive Support Needs, really does highlight a lot of additional tangible day-to-day activities that can make opportunities for students with more extensive needs be more successful in the least restrictive environment. So we highly promote this resource as well. And with that was a lot around the high leverage practices, but we would love for you to just take a moment and have an opportunity in the chat to stop, take about 30 seconds of some self-reflection, and then answer, why should educators, regardless if you're a leader, coach, para, school psychologist, counselor, why should educators be interested in the HLPs? And we'd love to see a few comments, if anything is resonating with you so far, in the chat. As I wholeheartedly agree, Stephanie, the more we get into high leverage practices, it really is, look, it's for the teacher to work on their skill set to make sure they are best meeting the individual needs of every child that's walking into their classroom, wholeheartedly. Totally agree with that too. Well, sometimes there are benefits when teachers go out and search and find some exciting things when they go rogue. The 22 high leverage practices, really through those numerous years of research, are those core foundational skills that every educator needs to have to be as effective as possible in the classroom. So they don't necessarily need to go out to teachers, pay teachers, and do all these other things to try and find what can work in the classroom. This is that hard work, and that heavy lifting's kind of been done. And again, that ownership for all students. We can't, Ashley and I cannot emphasize enough how passionate and strongly we believe in that, how much our grant and our team members believe in that as well. And Melissa, I agree too. Before I came and started working with this the SIL team, I was not even aware that the HLPs existed. And so I thought for myself, when I was a program specialist, where were these when I was trying to work with some of my staff to improve some skill sets of working with parents, bringing in our gen ed colleagues to really share the work. So we are hoping that through the grant work, we've been able to shout from the mountaintops how much these are valuable. And there's really not anything earth-shattering about it. It just kind of grounds us in what we need to focus on to be a good educator. And with that being said, I'm going to jump into a couple more of the components of the resource so we can dive into the resource and how it can be helpful, we hope, for anyone working with students in the classroom. So we did have or include the California standards for the teaching profession, and they do somewhat align very much with what is important or what we find valuable with the high leverage practices. But on our resource, we did include these just to help make sure when you're planning and you're looking at what you need to do as an educator, or you're supporting educators with additional services, or if you're a service provider, it's very important for us to remember what it is that us as educators are continuing to look at from the professional standpoint. So on our resource, we did include the CSTPs, so you can connect those when you're looking at, if you're an individual kind of trying to track your own work and monitoring and collecting data and just looking at your own practice on what's working and what's not to improve your own practice and meeting your own professional goals. So the CSTPs are a part of our resource as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in real quick on that too. And it's just a reminder to educators that these practices aren't one more thing. Like if you look at the CSTP, I mean, this is just a regular part of our responsibilities as an educator. So it's just that alignment. It's like all of these things align. This is just a part of our role and what we do.
And then, of course, you can't go anywhere in the field of education anymore without really hearing and honing in on universal design for learning. I think almost every LEA across the state is utilizing UDL as part of their LCAP or the way they're trying to, or we're hoping to make inclusive practices more the norm. But like what we did for the HLPs, Ashley and I have kind of culminated what we feel are some of the key or the most pivotal or important components of universal design for learning. And we wanted to also emphasize that UDL is not something random. It is based on decades of research in neuroscience, and it is part of the Every Student Succeeds Act too. But as you can see there, UDL is considered best practicing for teaching all students an inclusive learning environment. UDL is there to remove barriers, and it's also there for teachers to just remind them that providing multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. So every student in every classroom has an opportunity to be involved and have access to an enriching educational opportunity. And in our resource too that we have in our participants folder, we took or shared what we feel are the 3 big UDL resources that can really make sure that everyone understands what it is. So there's a resource on what is UDL. There is their matrix in regards to the different components for levels of engagement, representation, action and expression. And then how does UDL connect to social emotional learning? And on that next slide, you're going to see the visual for the different UDL resources that we access to help support our work with the resource that we've created to make sure that they all align and they're easy to reference. And then the last bit and piece of the work that we included on the resource is taking some of the CASEL framework for social emotional learning. So again, we know that there are all these competing priorities or competing frameworks that you have to have when you're working in a classroom. But what we try to accomplish here is to show how there's parts of all of these components. When you're looking at it, they all streamline and you can utilize all of them with doing one lesson at a time, kind of build up your own skill set with how you can be intentional with your planning. And so here we just took parts of the CASEL framework. And of course, CASEL has really historically been there to establish high quality evidence-based SEL, starting in preschool, going all the way through high school and then beyond. And so for the last 2 decades, they really have strived to evolve and improve and really place an emphasis on equitable practices in education. So that's why we felt it was just vital to have CASEL's work be included in our resource. And then in your participants folder and in the slides, there are activities with some signature practices from CASEL to support SEL and the 3 that we've highlighted were welcoming activity, an engagement strategy, and then an optimistic closure. Also, all 3 are things that we will have included in our presentation to help model as well. And like all of the other sections, we did have in our resources here, if you want to continue in and dive deeper into CASEL resources, we have a link to their work as well. And with that being said, we're going to now jump in to the resource that we help kind of align all of these key foundations or key really important things that all educators should have in their toolbox.
All right, thank you, Shannon. I am going to now walk you through the actual resource, the moment we've all been waiting for. I always joke around, I'm like, I get the best part because everybody's excited to get in there and I get to navigate us through. So basically, well, I'm going to really break down one section of the resource, and that's student engagement. So as far as like those core competencies, those areas that we highlighted, like I mentioned earlier, with our job, Shannon and I spent a lot of time combing through resources, and we really wanted to funnel down to like, what are those really high need, high impact, social emotional competencies, those areas that we want to target, that we hear again and again that students need support with, those skills that need to be fostered. And again, the resource was initially brainstormed pre-COVID, but I would say like those needs coming out of that COVID area, we wanted to be sensitive to those as well, because we're hearing from educators, students are really struggling with social emotional skills, and being intentional with those resources we're connecting to support that. So we're looking at that first page of the resource. And again, the resource is linked in the that link document that you have. And I'm going to navigate you there. We're going to go live. I'm going to show you how the links work. But each component of this resource, each section, each social emotional competency it starts with a description. The reason we wanted to do that is because we know, in education, there's a lot of different language. There's a lot of different ways to describe skills, and we wanted to keep it from being vague. We wanted to look at all these different components, these different resources, and come up with like common language, because engagement looks different to everybody. Each of these skills looks different to everybody, but engagement in particular, what I might see as engagement, another educator, another practitioner, they might see it differently. So we wanted to be sure that we had some really direct common language in this document defining what that social emotional skill is. As you can see, we've got a basic layout, a basic format here. We have each of those connected practices listed out. We have those main skills associated with each of those areas, what that looks like within those resources, as well as a connected concrete practice. We found that was really important. That was some of the feedback from Katie Novak as well, was to give people something tangible, something they can go and implement. And we were really intentional with selecting those strategies because we wanted them to be not one more thing, not something overwhelming, but just things that naturally fit into the day. Things you can go do in your classroom. It doesn't require a lot of extra planning, materials, just things we can naturally embed. So like I said, before I go out to that live navigation to show you just how to navigate access, just wanted to break down the document so you could really like dive into each of those components. So for engagement, we have that first connected practice, which is a high leverage practices. And thank you, Shannon, for providing that really in-depth look at what high leverage practices are. So a connected high leverage practice to engagement is use strategies to promote active student engagement. So like Shannon gave that example, that's pretty broad, right? So let's look at our other connected practices and really get to that tangible strategy for how we can support engagement. CSTP, that's connected, using knowledge of students to engage them in learning. So again, like we're keeping in mind, because I mean, we have a lot of educators in the room, folks that are supporting students, and we know that often, when we first think of SEL or adding something in, it feels like one more thing, it feels overwhelming, but it's just that reminder that this isn't one more thing. It's a way to integrate and support our student social emotional learning within our day. UDL, connected checkpoint, optimize individual choice and autonomy. Castle framework, we have that self-awareness area, foster students in identifying personal, social, cultural, and linguistic assets. And we know that's engaging. We know when we connect to that, to students' backgrounds and interests, then we engage them in learning. So what's our connected concrete practice that supports engagement? Brain breaks. The benefit to brain breaks: relieves stress, promotes a positive learning environment. Think of yourself even as an adult learner. We all need brain breaks. We need those moments to step away. Our students need that as well. There is a lot of demand put on our students to just sit and listen and absorb information. And we know as adult learners that can be a struggle. So this is one way to support our students. We don't have time to actually practice this, but I certainly encourage you all to practice this as an adult learner, bring this back to the students that you serve. But essentially brain breaks, they're 1 to 3 minutes in length. So it's not a heavy lift. It's something you can quickly incorporate with your students. Students can do it individually. They can do it with a partner. You can do it whole class. You can either use it to be energizing, to regather students' attention, or calming. Let's say students are coming in after recess or lunch or PE and we need a calming activity. We can bring in a breathing activity, breathe in for 3, let out, have them do some stretching, any of those things. But we do have a resource here. It's a Sil Break Padlet. Definitely encourage you to check that out to explore this as an adult learner. There's some different breathing activities, some stretches. You can certainly do some of these with students as well. So check it out. There's our modeling right there of that strategy for you all. All right, so our next area is motivation. I'm not going to walk you through in depth. Instead, I'm going to navigate you to the resource. So we're going to go live. If you are in actually, I'm going to show you the participant link document also, so you can see exactly where to navigate to the document so you have access. Okay, so if you're in our participant document, you can access the resource supporting SEL through connected practices, the resource document by clicking on this link. This document, we have a shortcut on our System Improvement Leads website, but it is housed on the Novak Education website because, again, that was a collaboration with Katie Novak. And there's also a blog post that Shannon and I wrote. If you're just interested, again, it's kind of that background, that why. So a little interesting reading for you. This is free for a download. It is, again, it's a free resource. So feel free to download it, print it, share it with your colleagues. We also have some nice thick like cardstock copies as well. So let's say you would like to have some copies shared with your district. You can feel free to reach out to us as well. Sometimes we'll send those out if you've got professional development. We were presenting at a conference and someone from a district was saying they were doing an upcoming PD and they're like, oh, we have some copies, and then we shared copies as well. So of course, reach out to us if you ever want future PD for your organization or copies of the document. But again, it's free, so no copywriting, no fee. Download it, share electronic copies, print it. That's what we would love for you to do. All right, so navigation, we talked about logistics, how to get there. Once you're in the document, I'm going to show you a different page because we went in depth on engagement. So motivation, as you'll see here, all of these connected practices are hyperlinked and they take you out to associated websites with more information, more resources on the topic. So we gave you a lot of background information on these connected practices, but you can also click on the hyperlinks and explore. This link takes you to the CSTPs document. And of course, if you share with a colleague, they're new to the resource, they didn't come to the presentation, it gives them an opportunity to learn a little more as well. This takes us out to the Castle website. Obviously, we know a lot of great resources on there. Interactive Castle wheel. And the really cool part is we also have links to our connected SEL practice as well. So if we're looking at, actually, I'll show you engagement because we just talked about brain breaks and there's some additional resources on brain breaks. So here's a little support and research behind it. We've got the Castle playbook and science behind brain breaks. And then here's another great resource too. We've got some different ideas for brain breaks that you can use with your students as well. So I know we keep emphasizing it and we keep saying it, but we truly designed this resource to be all-encompassing and bring it all together. So that way you don't have to spend hours on Google trying to research all these different things. It's all here. Your resources are linked in. So I'm just going to navigate. Like I said, I'm not going to go super in depth, but just make you aware of what's available. So we talked about how you can link to the other resources. We've got engagement. I mentioned we were very intentional with the areas that we targeted for our areas of focus. Motivation. We know that's key. That's huge. That's a very important social emotional competency or skill. Self-regulation, that's another one. And again, I mean, we started this project prior to COVID, but we were very responsive to the needs of the field, what was being shared with us as well. And we found that these areas, and resilience, huge, again, coming out of that post-COVID area. These were areas that educators really needed some resources and support with in order to better support their students as well. So I am being very aware of our time and going to bring us back to our presentation. Shannon, I see there's a lot of things popping up in the chat. Were there any questions or anything I should address before I talk about just some other example activities?
No, I think you're pretty good. There's been some feedback about the information about the resources, and then someone just asked about the motivation link. But just to say that all of the key components are on the one particular document. So we have all 4 pieces is just in one resource. So when you print it out, it's kind of just like a folder. One is motivation, one is self-regulation. So each side or each face of the document addresses a different component.
Great. So with that being said, I just want to show just a couple other example resources before we start to close out, move into a call to action. And another example activity is a whip around. So just an opportunity to share, like, let's say it's the end of a lesson, it's the end of class, and you have a routine and everybody does a share out. And you know, maybe you ask what resonated with you, what was something new, what is something you want to learn more about. And it's just a way to it targets self-awareness, impulse control, practice those skills. I mean, it also gives you a gauge of students learning as well. So again, a quick, easy task to incorporate, you know, end of class, doesn't require extra planning. These different activities can become routines that you build in. You know, you teach it, you practice it, and it just becomes a part of the day, and it's not, instead of being one more thing.
And can I hop in real quick though too, Ashley? Ashley and I were both very strategic with some of the examples that we provided. Ashley has much more experience with working with older students. I am at the elementary level, but also worked somewhat with TK and preschool. So the resources, the majority of them of what we chose for the activities could be utilized in a very wide range of classroom environments to meet the needs of a very broad age group as well. So the majority of the activities that we identified or chose could be utilized with some tweaking with our younger kiddos all the way up to our students that are older. So we were also very strategic with identifying some of those activities that we put on the resource as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Shannon. I know, because I was really emphasizing that, you know, that whole piece around like common language on the areas and not being one more thing, but you're right. But like, we were really strategic in picking activities you could use with any grade level. Again, just like we want it to be broadly applicable to you all. And I just happened to be looking at the chat when you were sharing, Shannon, and I saw Charlotte said sometimes seasoned teachers need a refresher. and be open to new ideas. Aligning resources, excellent for this. Yes, agreed. I mean, because all of these things are good teaching practices, right? And I know we've all been guilty of this, but just sometimes you can get in a rut, and it's helpful to see some new ideas or just have a refresher on those basics. What are those core things that we can do to support students? With that being said, I am going to move us into a call to action because I don't want to rush through the end. You all, you have the resource, continue to explore. That's the best way to get better acquainted. Explore, take your time to look through it. But Shannon and I have, let me get to the slide. We've started doing something new with our presentations, and it's a call to action because we know we go to different conferences and PDs and you walk away very excited and very jazzed up, but then you go back to the office or you go back to your school site and you get caught up in the busyness, and the slide decks that were shared and the resources just stay on the computer or stay on the shelf. We put them on the shelf and we don't visit. And we have found that it is very important to have a call to action and come up with a concrete next step, because then we're more likely to do it, especially if we share. We put it out there and we share our plan. We're all more likely to take action and incorporate something new that we learned today and put this resource into practice, share it with others. So with that being said, I do have a prompt for you here. How do you plan to use supporting SEL through connected practices in your current context? We have a Jamboard, so you all will make this a concrete action step and we'll put it out there together and commit to it as a group. So you're going to click on the link, and Shannon will share the link to the Jamboard in the chat as well. It's also in our links for our session. Oh, I see a lot of Post-its being posted. Very exciting. Share during my next PLC. I love that. Share with your colleagues. Incorporate the Padlet for practicing student perspectives on specific topics for SEL work. Excellent. Share with other teachers at PLC. I see a theme there. Have some ideas how the HLPs can support my vision that I'm trying to make for my dissertation that I will be starting in the fall related to autism and assessment practices. Oh, very interesting. The connection to HLPs 1 through 6. Going to be sure SIP has posted all of these amazing resources on the conference platform. Excellent. Share with program managers. Perfect. Yes, we definitely encourage you to share with your colleagues. The resource is free. Download it, print it, share it. Reach out to us. We can share it. Share with teachers and other staff. Love the sharing. Okay. Please continue to memorialize your call to action here on our Jamboard. I am going to bring us back to our closeout because I know your time is important. So let's go ahead and close out our time together. So just a reminder, stay connected with us. Systemimprovement.org. Everything we offer is free because we are a grant-funded project. We have free resources for you to download. We have PD. Be sure to check us out. We're also on social media. If anything resonated with you today, feel free to share it out on your social media and be sure to tag us, follow us. We'd love to interact with you all and stay connected. Those are the handles for our socials. And we are here to support you as well, your presenters. Our emails are there. We put it out there because we want you to reach out to us and we want to connect with you. We want to support you. We want to support your districts. So thank you for joining us today. We are really glad out of all the sessions you could have chose, that you came and you joined us. So thank you, and thank you for all that you do for the students that you serve.